Well, welcome everyone. And I would like to acknowledge, first of all, the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Today, on behalf of all of us here at Cardinal, I am thrilled to be able to welcome our guest speakers, the Honourable Justice Michael Kirby, hello, Jane Hopkins in her role as President of PFLAG Plus Brisbane, and Dean Clifford Jones, National Director of Pride in Law. Welcome everyone, and I should just mention at the outset too that we obviously can't have a full room here because of current restrictions, so welcome to everyone listening in remotely and on our other levels for Cardinal lawyers in the building. I also welcome our special guests here today, Anne-Marie David, Executive Director, hello, Executive Director, Queensland of the College of Law, and also Chairperson of the Queensland Law Society Diversity and Equity Committee, of which Paul is also a member. And welcome to Mark O'Hare, Partner and Head of Private Business Tax and Advisory at Grant Thornton and Cardinal Board Member. Welcome to everyone. Also joining us remotely, Antonia Mercorella, Chief Executive Officer at the Real Estate Institute of Queensland, and Joshua Apanui, First Nations Cadetship Cultural Coordinator at the Queensland Law Society and member of our RAP Committee. So Pride Month is celebrated each year in June, and the purpose of the commemorative month is to continue to raise awareness for the LGBTIQ+ community, improve the attitudes of society, and encourage inclusiveness. As a partner and member of Cardinal's Diversity and Inclusive Committee, I'm proud to say that diversity and inclusion is truly ingrained in our values and culture. As a firm, we understand that success is driven through diversity and strength in diversity. And our inclusive culture is what makes Cardinal such a great place to work. I'm also pleased to say that I'm a proud rainbow mum myself. It is now my great privilege to introduce the Honourable Justice Michael Kirby as our first speaker this morning. Justice Kirby has had a long history in the legal profession. In the early stages of his illustrious career, he practised as both a solicitor and as a barrister. He served as the inaugural chairman of the Australian Law Reform Commission before his appointment as a judge of the Federal Court. He has also served as the President of the New South Wales Court of Appeal and as a Justice of the High Court of Australia. When he retired from the High Court in February 2009, Justice Kirby was Australia's longest-serving judge. He is also a well-respected educator and is an honorary professor at 12 Australian and overseas universities, and he has no less than 30 honorary degrees. He has also held numerous senior international roles, including at the OECD, UNESCO, the UN and the World Health Organization. Justice Kirby has been awarded a number of honours for his dedication to the law and human rights, including being named as a National Trust Australian Living Treasure. As well as being the most outstanding jurist of the past century, he has been a well-respected commentator and fierce advocate for human rights, equality, same-sex relationships, and those living with HIV/AIDS. Justice Kirby has lived in Sydney with his partner, Johan van Vleuten, since 1969, and they married on their 50th anniversary in 2019. Justice Kirby was the first judge of any first national court in the world to be open about being gay. He is someone who has a huge social conscience and has been a role model and inspiration to many students and practitioners over the years. We are truly honoured to have you here today, Justice Kirby, to speak at our Pride Month celebration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for that introduction. And it's a whole lot better to be a living national treasure than a buried treasure. I also acknowledge the Indigenous people of our country right across our continental land and the many wrongs that have been done to them in the law. When I was at law school, I never raised questions about the denial of full equality to Indigenous Australians, the First Nation peoples. I didn't raise questions about equality of women in the law. I didn't raise questions about the White Australia policy, and I didn't raise any questions about an inequality that was very obvious to me, namely that of the LGBTIQ queer community. So all of that shows that we have to ask questions, and it's by questioning that we make progress in our country and in the world. The moment that we are in our history is a rather frightening and dangerous time. The COVID statistics that are out today are still very worrying in New South Wales and even in sunny Queensland. You've had a new lockdown introduced. In fact, I think we have learned a number of lessons from the way in which we dealt as a country with the HIV pandemic. And it was, in fact, that pandemic that really taught my partner Johan and me in our lives to stand up and to be honest, truthful, reach out and to stop the game of shame, which was the circumstance in which we grow up in earlier times in Australia. My partner actually was from the Netherlands, which had abolished its criminal laws against gay people in 1807. And that was nearly 200 years before we got round to abolishing it in Australia. And it therefore was not a legal inhibition in his country, but there were social inhibitions and religious opposition, and those inhibitions have also existed in Australia. I'm very proud to be here with Jane Hopkins, and I congratulate her on being the president of PFLAG in Queensland. She follows in the footsteps of Shelley Argent, who really became an important national figure in the equality for all LGBTIQ people. And I'm also pleased that Dean Clifford Jones and Paul Hopkins are here, and they're going to follow on these remarks of mine. One feature of the shame that was instilled in people in Australia when I was growing up was that it meant that people like me went into a deep trance of denial. But it had a bit of a silver lining in that I joined student politics. I never referred to my sexuality. And in student politics, I became the king of the committees. I was in charge of so many committees, and I joined so many organisations, and I became very involved in the Council for Civil Liberties and in other activities. And that was later to be a great help to me when I became a barrister and a judge, because I knew how to run meetings, I knew how to advance issues, I knew how to advocate for fundamental human rights, although we didn't tend to call them that in those days. And this motivated me to be a joiner in my life, and that is an attitude to life that I strongly urge upon everybody in this audience. We should be joiners, we should be questioners, and we should be standing up for equality, which is the fundamental principle of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The first article of that great document is ringing in my ears today as I speak to you. All persons are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And if you remember that, then you know how you have to tackle the inequalities affecting Aboriginals, the inequalities affecting women, the inequalities affecting people of different skin colour, the inequalities affecting people with disabilities, for inequalities, unnecessary inequalities affecting prisoners, refugees, and LGBTIQ people. All persons are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Now, in growing up, I had a fairly ordinary sort of life in the suburbs of Sydney. I grew up in the suburb of Concord. I went to the local Anglican church. I said my prayers, and I had a loving family, wonderful parents, young parents. I had marvellous siblings, my two brothers, and my sister. My sister was the only one who escaped the law. She went into nursing, but my brothers, both of them, became lawyers. I was the eldest, and I helped them with their homework, and one of them became a partner in a big legal firm in Sydney, and the other became a judge of the Supreme Court of New South Wales. He did wall-to-wall murder, so he had a really difficult life. I went on, as you've heard, into the areas of appellate judging in the Court of Appeal of New South Wales and in the High Court of Australia. For many of those years, I did what my society told me to do. I kept very, very quiet about my sexuality. The deal was very clear. Everyone knew what the deal was. The deal was, we will leave you alone so long as you do not, you are not open about your sexuality. You must be, or at least you must pretend to be, deeply ashamed of your sexual orientation or gender identity. You must keep it a big, dark secret. And that is how things were in those days. If I had not played by the rule of shame, which is the opposite of the rule of pride, I would certainly not have been appointed to my various judicial offices, and my life would have been very different. But I played by those rules, and ultimately my partner Johan, who is from the Netherlands, said to me, "How long do you think you're going to be around?" And I said, "Well, my father was then still around, and he lived to be 95." And I said, I think I'm around for a while. He said, "Well, we have to stand up, and we have to be open and honest, and we have to stop this hypocrisy. It is unscientific, it is ignorant, and I'm very surprised that you're still going along with it." And I said, "Oh, don't you think we should delay this until after the time in the judiciary is over?" "No," he said, we must make a stand." The people of the Netherlands, they're rather like us in Anglo-Saxon communities, but they're a bit more blunt. In fact, they can sometimes be very blunt. And he was very blunt. And he said, "We've got to stand up for the young people." And this is essentially what Jane Hopkins and Paul Hopkins and others in the PFLAG movement and what other citizens are now doing in increasing numbers, standing up and saying this old story is like the hobgoblins. We don't go along with it. It is not scientific, and we've got to stop it. And we've got to stop it quickly because it does harm to younger people. And that's what Johan said to me, slamming down on the table in our kitchen in Sydney. And so I then accepted the advice of my partner, and I started to be much more open about my sexual orientation. I had basically been open during the HIV epidemic. Johan became an Ankali. That's a system in New South Wales. I don't know whether you have it up in Queensland, which helps people who are living with AIDS or with HIV. And he used to cook and go along and talk to people who were living with HIV. And I did what I was good at. I went to endless conferences and international conferences and took part in the Global Commission on AIDS. And often that led to the need to change attitudes to human sexuality, because that had become a real impediment to the proper handling of the HIV epidemic. So this was the development that came upon us in the 1980s. It became more open and direct in the 1990s, by which time I was sitting on the High Court of Australia. It was good for the High Court, it was good for the justices, it was good for the Governor-General and the state governors and all the others. And even the Queen was quite happy when I brought Johan along. People today are fed up with the ignorance that has existed in the past, and it is imperative that PFLAG and others, good citizens, should say enough of that, that's over, we're now going to be scientific and we're going to be honest about issues of sexual orientation and gender identity. Now that in Australia is going to be a little bit difficult. We're facing a little period of rocky times. We thought most of our problems had been solved and would go away after the marriage equality postal vote and the rather reluctant but ultimate decision of our federal parliament to provide marriage equality in this country. Johan and I, as you've heard, got married on the 50th anniversary, exactly to the day and to the hour. That's the sort of thing lawyers do, you see. We keep our diaries in our mind, and we know the day and the hour that we had met, and that we thought would be the end of the oppression, or at least the beginning of the end of the oppression. But unfortunately, the enemies of LGBTIQ equality won't give up. And I'm afraid we're going to be facing in Australia a new challenge in respect of LGBTIQ equality, and that is the challenge of the so-called religious liberty legislation, which is about to come into the federal parliament and to be urged upon the nation. Now, I have remained connected with my religion. I'm perfectly happy being an Anglican. I don't want anyone to try to take my religion from me, and I believe that one of the lessons the Anglicans learned because of the fight between the Protestants and the Catholics was you've got to sort of have a kind of compromise on issues. And that, I hope, is what we're going to see in the unfolding of the religious liberty arguments. I believe in religious liberty. I demand religious liberty for myself. I know that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the other human rights instruments provides for religious liberty. But lawyers know that where a right is given in a context, you have to understand that right by comparison to the other rights that are given, and you've got to provide for that right and respect that right in a context that also respects other rights and can accommodate all of the rights together. Sir Zelman Cowen, who was for a long while the Vice Chancellor of the University of Queensland and became a Commissioner of the Law Reform Commission with me, gave a wonderful set of lectures called The Right to Swing My Arm. And this is a reminder of a well-known saying that the right of one person to swing their arm has to be accommodated in a world that provides for the protection of those who might be hit by somebody swinging their arm. The right to swing my arm stops when I hit somebody else on the chin. And this is what we have to consider in the case of religious liberty. We have to respect people's right to believe what they believe, to pray and preach what they believe, certainly in their temples. But when it goes out into the public space, a point will be reached where they hit somebody's chin. And when that happens, the law is there to protect other people and their rights. And that is what a message that we have to get over to those who are now advocating the right to swing the arm of religion in a way that will do harm and damage, mental health and other damage, even physical harm and damage to other people who happen to be LGBTIQ, queer. And so this is something we're going to have to keep a very close eye on. And I'm speaking now as a citizen and as a lawyer. We're going to have to keep an eye on the demands that in the name of religious liberty, people should be able to expel a child from a school or should be able to deny in the instruction of schools the reality and the latest knowledge and scientific knowledge about the variations of human sexuality and other mammalian sexuality, and to speak science and not to condemn other people for reasons that they do not choose and cannot change. So this is going to be a debate which we have to have, I'm afraid, in the months ahead. And it extends not just to the pupils in schools. It's not really a problem in public schools because in the great movement for public education, of which I was a beneficiary in the 1860s, Australia embraced the principle of secularism in public schools. But it is a problem in some religious and private schools. And most of them now are recipients of very substantial taxpayer funds. And both for that reason and for reasons of principle, they have to provide pastoral care and support for students who happen to be LGBTIQ, but they also have to provide support for teachers and others who are from sexual minorities. And this is going to be a battle that will be fought in the months ahead. And I do hope that the great achievements of marriage equality will protect Australians who are LGBTIQ and their families and loved ones and their friends and their allies from a return of the oppression that existed in the past. in my life now, I'm mostly involved in the issues of sexual orientation and gender identity at an international level. That's because of work I'm doing now as a co-chair of the Human Rights Institute of the International Bar Association based in London. And sadly, the kinds of reforms that we have adopted in Australia, getting rid of the criminal laws against gay people and sexual minorities, and oppressing people, particularly trans people, they are a very large problem in many countries. In some countries, indeed, criminal penalties include the death penalty for LGBT people, as they did in England in the up to the 1830s and 40s. And therefore, most of my work in this domain is now connected with the international struggle, often sadly in countries of the Commonwealth of Nations that inherited the criminal law which has oppressed LGBT people in the past. But there are still issues at home, and those issues include that of the religious liberty debate that I have mentioned. And it is the duty of all lawyers to be concerned about the issues of equality, and the duty of all citizens to be involved in removing the discrimination that existed in the past. And that is why I was very pleased to have the opportunity to take part in the Carter Newell webinar today and to speak in support of the work that Jane Hopkins and Paul Hopkins and other good citizens are doing. Thank you all very much for being here. Remember, nothing was ever really achieved by LGBT people without the support of straight people. And that's because the straight people are the majority and the LGBT people are the minority, and they need the support of intelligent, knowledgeable, science-observing citizens from their families and their friends and their colleagues at work. And I express the hope that everyone who is taking part will support the advance, not just in Australia, but in our region and in the world, of equality for all minorities, that they will see the issues of LGBT inequality in the context of First Nations inequality, of women's inequality, of racial inequality, and of disability inequality, and all the other inequalities. They will not just be obsessed about gay inequality, but they will be concerned with what Eleanor Roosevelt and those who built the Universal Human Rights Declaration: all people are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And our lives as lawyers and as citizens should be dedicated to attaining and protecting and upholding that important principle. Thank you for having me today, and now we're going to move on to other talks, and then ultimately there will be time for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Justice Kirby. We've been truly privileged to hear from you today, and on behalf of everyone at Carter Newell, thank you so much for your time. I understand you're going to stay online to listen to our next two guest speakers, and now I'd like to welcome Jane Hopkins. Jane Hopkins really doesn't need any introduction, but allow me to introduce Jane in her role as the President of PFLAG Plus. And Jane, upon accepting the role, has had her vision to bring enthusiasm and a positive approach. She is passionate about the importance of continuing to offer support to families and friends of the lesbian and gay community, as well as a particular inclusiveness to people with gender diversity. Jane is active in the community, providing information along with emotional and practical support to families. Jane is very much involved with the ongoing advocacy regarding the rights of LGBTIQ+ loved ones. So welcome, Jane. Thank you.
Thanks, Beck. Hello, everyone. I am very grateful to be invited today. This is a wonderful opportunity to join you in celebrating Pride Month and raising awareness of LGBTIQ issues. I wholeheartedly endorse Justice Kirby's views, and I'd like to acknowledge what an inspirational role model he is to us all, as lawyers and also as allies of the rainbow community. From personal experience, I know he is revered in our family, not only for his renowned intellect and exceptional legal expertise, but beyond this, he is greatly admired as a human rights advocate who personifies grace, wisdom, humility with an endearing sense of humour. I feel privileged to be given the chance to collaborate with someone for whom I have the highest respect. As you know, I represent PFLAG Plus. It's a community-based non-profit group offering support to parents and friends with LGBTIQ loved ones. The organisation was originally formed in America by a woman named Jean Manford. The story goes that one evening, Jean received information that her son Morty was in hospital. He had been brutally beaten whilst advocating for gay rights at a political dinner in New York City. Reports stated that Morty was kicked and stomped while being led away by police. In response to this news, his mother, the normally quietly spoken and reserved school teacher, was furious, causing her to write a letter to the editor of the New York Post complaining about police inaction. Not long after this, she walked beside her son in the New York Pride March carrying a sign which read, "Parents of gays unite in support of our children." At a time when homosexuality was considered a mental disorder and a crime, this brave revolutionary act displayed the determination of a mother's love. Jean was overwhelmed by enthusiastic response that she received that day from many young people that were in the crowd who expressed or confided in her how fearful they were to come out to their own parents. With this in mind, she decided to create a support group for parents, and the first PFLAG meeting was held in 1973 in a church in Greenwich Village. 20 people attended. There are now thousands of groups across the globe where parents can connect to find peer support and resources for their families. For those of you who have got children or are expecting, you will understand the worries that accompany parenting. The primal desire to keep them safe is universal, and it pervades all cultures. The strong instinct to protect our children keeps you only as happy as your unhappiest child. And we're all familiar with the old saying that reiterates the lifelong commitment of responsibility. This worry will be with you from cradle to grave. I think that you'll probably all agree that in actual fact it commences before childbirth, during pregnancy. So the list of concerns can be multifaceted and nuanced, but primarily the most common fears are associated with their child's safety and well-being, whether it is schoolyard bullying, navigating the internet, dealing with the potential harm caused by adolescent risk-taking behaviour, illness or addiction, and now we have COVID to throw into the mix. When a parent first discovers that their child is gender questioning or identifying as LGBTIQ, it is very common for them to express feelings of fear, Beyond concern for their child's safety, they are worried that their child will face discrimination and not be afforded the same legal and human rights as their siblings. The disturbing fact is that the rainbow children are at a much greater risk of mental health disruption. They are 6 times more likely to self-harm or suicide than their straight peers. And as you would appreciate, for all parents, there is no greater fear in the world. Conversely, studies will show that when a child has a close connection with a loving parent, this risk is dramatically and significantly reduced. It's with this in mind that PFLAG Plus offers reassurance and strives to advocate for our loved ones by raising awareness through education, visibility and peer support. We provide a phone hotline 24/7, bi-monthly in-person community meetings. We have online website resources, a monthly newsletter and a library. We enjoy participating in public events when we can, despite COVID, such as Pride Fair Day, Trans Visibility Day, and many more. I'm involved with the University of Queensland and QUT Wear It Purple Day, which raises awareness for suicide prevention. Through community networking, we can supply references for services such as the Gender Clinic, social workers, psychologists, doctors, who've all been specifically experienced or trained in LGBTIQ health. We can recommend social groups for children and make personal introductions. The inquiries for assistance are so varied. I've discovered hairdressers, personal trainers who are allies, and recently I was asked to recommend a driving instructor who was trans-friendly and worked in the area of Mount Gravatt. We've established strong relationships with Pride in Law, Pride in Business, and in March we supported the Queensland Theatre Company to promote a groundbreaking play which brought light to the issues that are faced by our transgender communities. On Thursday, I had intended and hoped to attend an annual statewide training day for liaison officers at the Queensland Police Force, but I've just found out late last night that that's been cancelled, unfortunately. We work with domestic violence organisations such as DV Connect Queensland, and I've recently been asked to collaborate with a diversity team at the Department of Transport and Main Roads. I do recognise that our society has changed dramatically for the better for our LGBTIQ loved ones, but like Justice Kirby, I feel that it seems apparent that there is still more work to be done. Last year, I met up with a group of LGBTIQ students from the Australian Catholic University who were having trouble establishing peer support on campus. Each time they put up a rainbow poster, overnight it would be taken down. With support from PFLAG Plus, they have since been thrilled to receive acknowledgement with a grant to start a social club and attend events such as Market Day. So they're well and truly in the right direction for getting visibility. A little while back, I received a call from a lesbian couple who had been on the receiving end of some overtly cruel discrimination at a cafe in Montville. After counselling them and offering them comfort that they were not alone, nor deserving of this poor behaviour, I was able to connect them with the Department of Human Rights, Legal Aid, and following some bad press generated by an article in Q News, the local businesses in the area of Montville and beyond came out in support for this couple by displaying colourful flags and banners all the way along the main street. There were rainbows everywhere. Just like the importance of promoting conversation and awareness during times like Pride Month, we must ensure that we have workplaces and schools that have a culture of transparent inclusivity and diversity beyond the image of policies and tokenism, so that everyone can feel safe to be themselves. I receive phone calls more and more regularly now from parents whose children are identifying as transgender or non-binary. The kids are presenting at a younger age because often a mum, due to greater awareness, is tuning in to the language of their child. It's becoming more common to get a phone call from a guidance officer in rural and regional schools asking for information to support students who are questioning their gender or their sexuality. It does encourage me to think that the resources will be improving for isolated youth and their families, leading to greater acceptance and tolerance of diversity in the bush. Closer to home, at least weekly, I speak with teachers or GOs from local schools, whether they're private, state, religious or independent, seeking professional development for staff or referrals for parents. Some schools are better than others in showing an interest in supporting LGBTIQ youth to come out at school, which makes me feel hopeful that the conditions will continue to improve in education to raise awareness of tolerance and acceptance for these minority groups. We all know that adolescence is a uniquely challenging time where teenagers, who mostly always just want to fit in, should feel safe that they will be accepted for who they are as a person. I'm currently liaising with academics to facilitate greater consultation with the Queensland Education Department to achieve this. At the end of the day, most parents want their kids to be happy, healthy, to be loved, to be kind, to find a career that they enjoy, to be respected by their peers, to be lucky in love and not have their hearts broken. But most of all, we want our children to exist in a world where this is possible. At PFLAG Plus Brisbane, we hope to support these simple expectations and keep families together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane, and for everything you and PFLAG do for the LGBTIQ community. We now have an opportunity to hear from our last guest speaker, Dean Clifford Jones. Dean has been practising as a lawyer for over a decade, primarily in the criminal law and child protection space, and he is a full-time member on the Parole Board of Queensland. In 2017, Mr Clifford Jones founded the National LGBTIQ+ Law Association, Pride in Law, and he continues to be a national director. Mr Clifford Jones' accomplishments include becoming the Law Council of Australia's 2020 Australian Young Lawyer Award recipient, as well as of Griffith University's 2018 Outstanding Young Alumnus Award. I'll now pass on to Dean Clifford Jones.
Well, thank you. I'll remove this now and hopefully you can hear me a little bit clearer. First, can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners and sharing in what Jane and His Honour has said today. I acknowledge that these lands was and always will be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander lands, and I feel incredibly blessed to be living in Australia with our Torres Strait Islander and Aboriginal peoples. Can I also just pay respect as well to the LGBTI leaders that have come before me. As a 36-year-old, I know that the 1970s and 1980s were difficult times, all the way up to now, for the rainbow community. And I know that there have been many, many leaders that have come before me, including today of His Honour Justice Michael Kirby. And I want to just pay my respect to those people, because without those, I wouldn't be standing before you today. Can I also just say thank you to Carter Newell for assisting Pride in Law, in being a sponsor of Pride in Law and inviting me here today. It's a great honour and privilege. I've been asked to talk to you today about my life in the law, but also Pride in Law itself. I feel incredibly thankful to have been an Australian, but I'm not thankful for living through the 1980s and 1990s, particularly in a regional location of Australia. There was constant homophobic remarks, jokes, belittling, unambiguous stigma associated with being a gay person in Australia. And unfortunately, despite marriage equality, that continues today. And what I hope from these sort of educational networking events, the work of PFLAG Plus, the work that His Honour Michael Kirby does every single day, that we can continue to break down barriers and help the younger people that will come after us. I started my life in the legal profession in 2004 as an intern at a small firm. And it was around that time that, in fact, I reached out to PFLAG because I didn't know where to go. Jane wasn't there at that time, but I'm incredibly thankful for having these organisations to assist me and my family in overcoming what was still a lot of stigma in 2004, coming out as a gay man. I recall the first days of venturing into a law firm. What do you wear? How do you act? Do I wear a tie or not? And will people assume that I'm gay because of my speech impediment? My speech impediment comes from not being gay, but being born significantly hearing impaired. But that's always a story for another time. I then graduated university in 2009, and then in 2010, after finishing my time as a judge's associate, I worked at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and was fortunate to become a Crown Prosecutor and then work in the child protection arena, as you've been told. And today I'm being appointed to the Parole Board and decide prisoner applications for parole. As you've heard, in 2017, I launched Pride in Law. I launched Pride in Law because I'd returned from living a couple of years in Rockhampton, and I hadn't remained close with a lot of my friends here in Brisbane. And when I returned in 2016, I was so concerned that so many of my peers weren't out in the workplace. Now, this was before the marriage equality plebiscite and all of those issues that came after. And I wondered why in 2016 there wasn't any LGBTI or Pride network for lawyers. We've come a long way in the last 5 years, and there are great internal networks in many top-tier firms, mid-tier firms, in government sectors, but there's no other LGBTI law association for lawyers, for people practicing in the legal profession. And I wanted to reach out and support my friends and provide them a way to connect with others and to connect with their allies. And so that is why in 2017, after a year of social media and going through those hurdles, we officially launched Pride in Law at the Banco Court in Queensland, at the Supreme and District Courts. It was a truly historic moment, I believe, for the LGBTI legal profession. It created a platform for people to come together, to connect, and now we have chapters not only here in Queensland, but in Western Australia, Victoria, and I hope all across Australia, if not around the world, in the years to come. The purpose of Pride in Law is similar to that of PFLAG Plus. It's about creating visibility. It's about creating education, but it's also about advocating. And that is why we now make submissions to all courts to assist them with their bench book, We also assist the federal government by making submissions, as you heard today, in relation to the so-called religious discrimination bills that have already been through phase 1 and phase 2, and we'll soon hear about phase 3 of the proposed legislation. And again, Pride in Law will make a submission to the federal government on that issue. We make submissions here in Queensland, and we are supported, as I've mentioned, by Carter Newell, as well as other great sponsors from all around Australia that also have international firms and locations. We hope that by providing a voice to sometimes the voiceless, that we won't have to go through what we went through during the HIV/AIDS epidemic. We hope that our team of volunteers, and every single person on Pride in Law is a volunteer, not one person is paid a single dollar for all the work that they do, whether it is daily social media, submissions, events. It is all volunteer work, and thanks to great firms like Carter Newell, we're able to do that. I'll end today, and I often end talking to people on this point, so excuse me if you've heard this before, but I think during Pride Month, it's a real reminder of what is Pride. And to me, Pride is not about who you are, it is about what you represent. Equality, respect, and acceptance of others, but also acceptance of yourself. Thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you, Dean. I'd just quickly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Thank you, Dean. A really special way to finish today, to link it back to our great profession, and really, to hear your story. There's courage in that. You're here today, and essentially, for us, it's just at Carter Newell, we embrace diversity and inclusiveness across our firm. But if we can help provide some leadership to our profession, that's really important to us, because it is critical to us that our people and people across our profession can come into their daily routine of life with their true selves. We, the partners of our firm, the management team, we are unapologetic about that. That is just how it needs to be. And just today, the thread from Justice Kirby, I spoke to Justice Kirby a couple of days ago, and he mentioned, as he did today again, the way to approach life and to support all minorities. And that's absolutely, to be so endorsed, Justice Kirby, because there is so much help that we can give, and the comments in relation to heterosexual allies, it is important. It is important to really call out poor behaviour. It is not right anymore to stand by and witness poor behaviour and think, well, that doesn't involve me. That is not good enough, and certainly unacceptable at Carter Newell. And if, as a firm, we can help provide leadership across our profession, then that is a great thing. Janie gave some really, disturbing statistics on the mental health side, and the suicide numbers being as high as they are. That alone just makes you feel, really, angry, but also, okay, let's do something about this, because people's mental health is important. And back to what Justice Kirby said, it's across all our minorities. And so really, today, I just want to thank our speakers to wrap up. Justice Kirby, that was just as inspirational as ever, and we look forward to staying engaged with you on this journey that we're on. You just provide such wonderful leadership to the community as a whole, and your role globally is to be acknowledged today. Your role globally is just fantastic, and it's making the world a better place. Janie, thank you, because the role, work that PFLAG do and you do is absolutely, on the ground, real world stuff every day. you know, and it's just really, we're all very grateful. And then Dean, again, just what a wonderful, you know, you putting yourself forward like that, and we will continue to be great supporters of Pride in Law. So look, that's I just want to thank everyone from for the guest speakers, but all the Carter Newell attendees. We will be making this available as a video to clients. But, you know, thanks everyone. I just feel that we've really achieved something today. It's been a fantastic session. So I just thank those that are at home, those that are on level 14 or sitting in their offices. Thank you for your time, because this is very important to CN, and it's important for our profession, and it's important to our community. So Justice Kirby, thank you. We'll say goodbye, and we'll talk to you soon. And everyone else, if you join me in thanking all our 3 speakers today.